Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A former advisor to the Pope has become the most senior Catholic clergyman to be convicted of child sex offences. Cardinal George Pell was found guilty by an Australian court of sexually abusing two 13-year-old boys in Melbourne Cathedral 22 years ago. He was convicted in December, but the verdict can only now be reported for legal reasons. From Melbourne, Harold Griffith sent this report.
Once talked about as a future pope, Cardinal George Pell's fall from grace has ended, with him facing up to 10 years in jail. Pell has a reputation in Australia for being tough and uncompromising, but he used his power to manipulate and abuse. Outside court, a statement was read out on behalf of one of his victims.
Like many survivors, I have experienced shame, loneliness, depression and struggle. Like many survivors, it has taken me years to understand the impact on my life.
In 1996, in one of his first services as Archbishop of Melbourne, Pell found two choir boys helping themselves to communion wine. He told them that they were in trouble and then forced both into a series of sexual acts. For years, Pell purported to be someone who wanted to help abuse survivors, setting up a world-first system here in Australia to offer counselling and compensation. In reality, it only served to mask his own crimes. George Pell became one of the most powerful people in Rome. Today, the Vatican said it was pained by the verdict, but it stopped short of forcing him to resign. Despite being a convicted paedophile, he remains a cardinal, with the power to vote on who becomes the next pope.
We await the outcome of the appeals process, recalling that Cardinal Pell maintains his innocence and has the right to defend himself.
For some abuse survivors in Australia, Rome's reticence is abhorrent.
Excommunication. There is no other choice. It will be a farce from the Catholic Church if they once again give lip service. It's about time the Catholics, from the Pope down, started to practice what they preach.
After months of secrecy and suppression, the world can now learn about George Pell's crimes. A man trusted by millions around the world has been held to account. When he returns to court next, he knows he faces a prison sentence. Howard Griffith, BBC News, Melbourne.
Now, he's the most senior Catholic cleric ever charged with child sex abuse. Cardinal George Pell is economy minister to Pope Francis, the third most powerful man in the Vatican. But a court in Australia has convicted him of sexually abusing two choir boys in Melbourne's St Patrick's Cathedral in 1996. The Vatican, though, has said it must await the outcome of the appeals process before deciding whether to remove him from the College of Cardinals. Here's Porrick O'Brien.
Cardinal George Pell's ascent to power was slow, steady, solemn.
You're a monster! You're gonna burn in hell, you...
His downfall was not.
Burn in hell, pal! Burn in hell, pal!
Yesterday, a jury in Melbourne convicted him of one charge of raping a child and 4 counts of committing an indecent act on a child. As Vatican treasurer, the 77-year-old was seen as the Church's third most powerful official. The verdict comes just 48 hours after the Pope's child abuse summit in the Vatican and has enormous implications for the Church. But it's about the crime first, where we will start. The jury heard that in 1996, the newly appointed Archbishop of Melbourne found two 13-year-old choir boys in cathedral rooms after Mass. He told them they were in trouble for drinking communion wine, then forced the boys into indecent acts and abused one of them again a year later. The court heard testimony from one of the victims. The other died of a drug overdose 5 years ago.
The defendant has been found guilty of sexual offences against my client, and I understand that an appeal has been lodged.
The survivor issued a written statement through his lawyer. It included a devastating explanation of what abuse does to a person.
At some point we realised that we trusted someone we should have feared. and we fear those genuine relationships that we should trust. I'm not a spokesperson about child sexual abuse. There are many other survivors and advocates who bravely fill this role. I'm just a regular guy working to support and protect my family as best I can.
As a young priest during the 70s, George Pell worked in the town of Ballarat, Victoria.
I'm Phil Nagel. I'm a survivor from St Alepius in Ballarat.
Phil Nagel was abused at the age of 9 by a different priest in a now infamous case in the town of Ballarat, Victoria.
I was absolutely happy when my abuser, Brother Stephen Francis Farrell, took another kid out of the class because it wasn't me. I knew he was taking him out to sexually abuse him, but I was rapt because it wasn't me. I mean, it was just horrific times.
During the 1970s in the school and church at Ballarat, 5 paedophile priests abused over 100 children.
12 of my classmates have passed away, which is well documented through the Royal Commission from a class of 33 in 1974. Over 12 have taken their own lives.
One of the worst offenders, Father Gerald Ridsdale, convicted of 138 sex offences against children. George Pell shared a house with him in Ballarat for a time. Here he is, accompanying Ridsdale to his trial.
I swear by Almighty God.
3 years ago, now Cardinal George Pell gave evidence to the Australian Royal Commission on Child Abuse, said he couldn't remember specific instances of reported abuse in Ballarat at the time. He did acknowledge that institutionally the Church had made mistakes.
The Church has, in many places, certainly in Australia, has mucked things up, has let people down. I'm not here to defend the indefensible.
The conviction today of someone who became so powerful within the Church is a body blow to the organisation's credibility when it comes to tackling abuse. It's particularly damaging to the more hardline conservative wing of the Church.
He is anti-homosexual. He doesn't agree with women being priests. He's anti-abortion. He's anti-contraception.
Pell's lawyers have lodged an appeal. His sentencing hearing begins tomorrow. Phil Nagel was not abused by Pell. He was abused by another priest. But the effects for him echo that of Pell's victim.
I put mechanisms in place where I wasn't alone with, adult males, not just clergy adult males, but all adult males, including my dad, because I thought that's what adult males did to boys. So, I put mechanisms in place to make sure that after grade 5, I was never in a situation where I was sexually abused again.
Warwick O'Brien with that report.